The first time the alien janitor arrived on the station, the human barely knew how to react. From the moment she stepped through the sliding doors, her presence was impossible to ignore. Her limbs moved in ways that defied human expectations, bending, twisting, and stretching with an almost acrobatic grace as she carried her cleaning supplies. She knelt to scrub a panel, then sprang to her feet, pivoting with a fluidity that made the human's heart skip a beat. Every movement was deliberate yet exaggerated, a performance of what she insisted was customary behavior in her culture. He tried to concentrate on his work, adjusting the delicate calibrations on a tool console, but every glance toward her brought another distraction. His hand slipped. A screwdriver clattered to the floor. His mouth opened, then closed again, muttering something under his breath that even he wasn't sure he intended to say aloud. She noticed. Her large, luminescent eyes flicked toward him, and she gave a slight tilt of her head, her equivalent of a polite greeting, or at least that's how she insisted it was meant. To her, his flustered reaction was a natural and expected acknowledgement of her authority and skill. To him, it was impossible to ignore the way her hips shifted as she bent low to polish a panel, the subtle curve of her back, the way her tail, or what humans assumed was a tail, swished in a rhythm that seemed synchronized to her cleaning motions. The more he tried to focus on his instruments, the more he found himself distracted. His human brain insisted that this was a work environment and nothing more, but his body betrayed him, dropping tools, knocking over small containers of lubricant, even slipping on the faint sheen of cleaning solution she'd left behind. Each incident left him scrambling to regain composure, muttering apologies that she waved away with a graceful flip of her wrist. She didn't notice, or perhaps pretended not to notice, that the human's reactions were more intense than any of her previous colleagues. Instead, she interpreted his frequent fumbling and sudden flushes as genuine admiration, an acknowledgement of respect. In her mind, she was doing him a favor, demonstrating the proper cultural etiquette of her species. Bending, stretching, twisting, these were all standard gestures of trust and politeness. On her planet, a being that didn't respond in some way would be seen as rude or dismissive. Here, however, the human's wide-eyed staring, dropped objects, and repeated attempts to adjust his stance created a feedback loop she found intriguing. She began to exaggerate her movements slightly, dipping a little lower when she scrubbed, extending a leg in a peculiar twist, all under the guise of customary demonstration. He felt trapped between fascination and embarrassment. He knew he should avert his gaze, but somehow, every movement she made seemed designed to draw attention. He reached for a rag to clean a smudge on his console, only to have it slip from his fingers and sail across the room, narrowly missing a humming maintenance drone. He cursed under his breath, cheeks burning, and tried to concentrate on his work, but she was already pivoting again, low to the ground, mopping the floor in wide, deliberate arcs. Every sweep seemed timed to maximize his distraction, though he told himself it was purely coincidental. Yet when she straightened, turned, and gave him a small, formal nod, his mind went blank. The rational part of him screamed that he needed to focus on the station systems, but a smaller, more guilty part reveled in the chaos she brought. The human attempted conversation, asking about her cleaning schedule or the supplies she used, trying to steer the interaction toward professional territory. She responded in her melodic alien accent, describing the customary motions of her species with great detail, punctuating her words with a bend or twist that made him stumble over his own speech. His coffee cup teetered on the edge of a table, and in his panic to save it, he nearly collided with the control panel. She glanced up, eyes wide and sincere, explaining that bending over in that manner was a sign of trust, a customary display of respect. She was entirely unaware that, to human eyes, every explanation sounded like an excuse for seduction. By mid-morning, the human's workstation resembled a minor disaster zone. Tools scattered across the floor, spilled coffee forming small puddles, wires dangling from consoles, and the faint smell of cleaning fluid lingering in the air. He tried to focus, pretending to monitor readings on a screen, but every time she bent, stretched, or twirled while scrubbing, He found himself caught between nervous laughter and helpless fascination. Objects seemed to fly in response to his distracted motions, small containers tipping, sheets of documentation fluttering to the floor, all while she continued her chore with unwavering dedication. Her cultural explanation, repeated with earnest gestures and bending motions, made his stomach twist in ways that were both awkward and strangely thrilling. At the end of her first shift, she straightened fully, gave a polite bow, and whispered, her translation module provided, "It is customary to show trust in this way. I hope it pleases you." The human froze. Did she mean it literally, or was this an alien tease? He couldn't tell. His tools lay in disarray, his coffee was ruined, and yet, amid the chaos, he felt an unexpected warmth. She was clumsy, yes, but there was charm in her sincerity. The way she moved, bending and stretching, was not just about cleaning, it was about expression, a language entirely her own, and somehow, despite, or perhaps because of, the awkward disasters she caused, he found himself anticipating her next movement, waiting to see what customary gesture she would perform next. Even as he left the room to gather himself, he knew that this first encounter was only the beginning. Her exaggerated, acrobatic bending wasn't just a cultural demonstration, it had unlocked a strange, flustered fascination in him that he couldn't ignore. Every spill, stumble, and flustered glance cemented the chaotic connection between them, setting the stage for more mishaps, accidental intimacy, and flustered comedy in the days to come. The alien janitor might have been just doing her job, but to him, she had turned simple cleaning into an elaborate, flustering, and undeniably adult performance. The following day, the human found himself both dreading and anticipating the janitor's arrival. Her presence had an almost gravitational pull. Every time she stepped into the room, his attention betrayed him, and his hands became traitors, dropping whatever he was holding. Today, however, she seemed even more energetic, moving with an almost cartoonish enthusiasm that made his brain short-circuit. She started her rounds by sliding across the floor in a sweeping motion, mopping in long, exaggerated arcs that sent a fine mist of cleaning fluid into the air. The droplets landed with uncanny precision on the edge of his console, forcing him to leap aside to avoid a soaked keyboard. As he scrambled, a tool flew from his hand, bouncing off a console and narrowly missing his foot. He cursed under his breath, muttering something about alien customs and safety protocols, but the janitor simply tilted her head and made a soft chirping noise, which her translator rendered as, "This is customary. Observe and trust." Her movements seemed choreographed to magnify his flustered reactions. She bent low, one leg extended behind her in a stretch that no human body could replicate without injury, and wiped a panel with exaggerated focus, completely unaware, or perhaps entirely aware, of the way his eyes widened. He attempted to look elsewhere, checking readings on his instruments, but he couldn't help glancing, only to knock over a stack of data pads in panic. They fluttered to the floor like oversized confetti. He reached to gather them, but as he leaned over, she pivoted in an arc, bending further, brushing past him with the soft swish of her limbs. His face burned, and his grip on the remaining tools tightened, only to have one of them slip from his hand again. Despite the chaos, she interpreted every stumble, every dropped object, every flustered glance as a sign of engagement. Her eyes glimmered with satisfaction. To her, this was not embarrassment, but a delicate dance of trust and attraction. She began deliberately performing her customary bending in his line of sight, adding spins, squats, and acrobatic flips that made even seasoned athletes pause. He tried to interject, explaining that she didn't need to perform for him, but she waved him off, continuing to demonstrate what she called the ritual of respect. Every gesture was more elaborate than the last, and the human's attempts to maintain dignity failed spectacularly. Accidental intimacy became unavoidable. At one point, he tripped over a stray mop, landing uncomfortably close to her. She reacted instantly, supporting him with an extended arm and a twist of her body, which sent both of them teetering. They ended up in a precarious tangle, his face inches from hers, cleaning fluid dripping onto their shoulders. Both froze, realizing the absurdity of the situation, and then burst into awkward laughter. She chirped softly, her translator rendering it as, "This is trust. You are learning." He mumbled something incoherent, too embarrassed to respond, and tried to extricate himself without causing more chaos. The comedy of errors continued as she moved from console to console. A bucket of cleaning solution tipped slightly, and he lunged to catch it, only to crash into a chair, sending tools flying in all directions. Sparks flew from a malfunctioning terminal, and the janitor, performing an elegant backbend to avoid them, inadvertently brushed against his arm. He yelped, both startled and flustered, and the moment stretched into an uncomfortable silence, filled with the dripping sound of cleaning fluid. She gave a small smile, tilting her head again, which his translator faithfully rendered as, "Your reactions aren't appropriate." His brain refused to parse the compliment correctly. Instead, it hammered on a loop of embarrassment, attraction, and disbelief. Even the other station personnel noticed. From behind partially closed doors, co-workers peeked out, whispering and nudging one another. "Is that normal?" one asked. Another laughed, pointing at the human, who was now frantically attempting to reorganize his workstation while simultaneously avoiding her acrobatic movements. The janitor paid no attention to them. To her, all eyes were on the human in question. She executed a particularly daring bend, reaching around a console to clean an overhead panel, forcing him to duck and nearly collide with a hovering maintenance drone. The drone beeped loudly in protest, and his panic only heightened. Romance began to weave its way subtly through the chaos. Amid the flustered accidents, he noticed the playful gleam in her eyes, the faint hum she made when satisfied with her work, the gentle brush of her fingers when she corrected his posture or guided him out of harm's way. What had begun as cultural confusion slowly evolved into mutual fascination. His initial embarrassment morphed into anticipation, and he found himself deliberately positioning himself where he could watch her movements safely, or at least attempt to, while simultaneously trying not to betray his human instincts entirely. The climax of the day arrived with an accident of comic proportions. As she executed a sweeping backflip while scrubbing a high console, the human misjudged his own movement, stepping onto a slippery patch of floor. He slid forward uncontrollably, flailing his arms in a desperate attempt to stabilize himself. She lunged instinctively to grab him, but her momentum carried them both into a precarious stack of crates. He landed against her chest, arms wrapped around her waist, eyes wide with panic and surprise. She chirped softly, translating it as, "You trust me now. This is customary." The words barely registered through the blur of embarrassment, wet clothes, and spilled cleaning solution, but they both knew the unspoken truth. The attraction between them had become undeniable, and their chaotic interactions were no longer purely professional or cultural. By the time the day ended, the human's workstation resembled a minor disaster zone. Tools scattered, cleaning fluids splashed across surfaces, wires tangled, and data pads lay in haphazard piles. He leaned back against the wall, breathing heavily, trying to process the whirlwind of events. The janitor straightened, glowing faintly under the station lights, and gave a small, formal bow. "It has been a successful demonstration," she said. His translator rendered it, and he could barely manage a nod in response, still recovering from the flustered close encounters. Despite the chaos, a small, mischievous part of him realized he had enjoyed every moment. She had turned cleaning into something absurd, exhilarating, and unexpectedly intimate. He didn't understand all of her customs, but he understood the feeling building between them, a mix of anticipation, humor, and undeniable attraction, setting the stage for even more elaborate and flusteringly intimate interactions tomorrow. The next morning, the human braced himself as the janitor appeared again, fully aware that any attempt to predict her movements would be useless. She launched into her cleaning routine with the same energy and exaggerated gestures as before, twisting, bending, and stretching as if gravity were merely a suggestion. He tried to focus on his instruments, reminding himself that work came first, but the moment she pivoted low to the floor, swinging a mop in wide arcs, he lost all concentration. His fingers slipped on a control panel, and a small toolkit went flying across the room. He lunged to catch it, only to stumble backward, nearly colliding with her extended leg as she executed a perfect backbend. His breath caught. He cursed under his breath, trying to find words that could explain the chaos, but none came. Every gesture she made seemed timed to maximize his flustered reaction, and somehow, he found himself anticipating the next one with a mix of dread and forbidden excitement. The situation escalated when the station captain, a stern and no-nonsense officer, stepped through the doorway without warning. The human froze in place, his limbs stiffening as if his body were attempting to vanish from sight. The janitor, oblivious to the human protocol of discretion, continued her acrobatic display, bending and pivoting with full commitment to what she insisted was customary. The captain's eyes widened at the spectacle, a human teetering awkwardly while trying to navigate around an alien performing seemingly impossible stretches and backbends, cleaning fluids spraying the floor, and tools scattered like fallen soldiers. He gasped audibly, and the echo reverberated off the metal walls, adding to the chaos. Objects collided in perfect comedic timing. A bottle of lubricant tipped over, rolling toward the captain's feet. The human tried to intercept it, arms flailing wildly, only to knock over a small stack of crates that toppled like dominoes. The janitor twisted midair to avoid the cascade, brushing past him and causing a brief, accidental embrace that left him wide-eyed and panicking. The captain muttered something about inappropriate conduct while carefully sidestepping the puddles of spilled cleaning fluid. From her perspective, every reaction of the human was confirmation that her demonstration was going exactly as it should. She chirped in her melodic alien tone, which her translator rendered as, "Observe. Trust is demonstrated through shared proximity and physical engagement." To the human, the words sounded almost conspiratorial, and he flushed deeply, feeling as if the universe had conspired to put him in the most compromising situation imaginable. Meanwhile, minor disasters kept piling up. A hovering maintenance drone zipped past, startled by the clamor, and nearly clipped the janitor as she executed a daring squat to polish a floor panel. The human leapt out of the way, tripping over a mop handle that had been left haphazardly in the middle of the room. He tumbled toward the captain, arms flailing, and barely managed to stop himself by grabbing the janitor's waist. Both went down onto one knee in an awkward tangle of limbs, cleaning fluid dripping down their shoulders. The captain's expression shifted from shock to utter disbelief as he slowly realized that this scene of flailing humans and twirling alien was not an accident, nor a breach of decorum. It was simply the janitor demonstrating her customary cleaning methods. In the midst of this chaos, the human and the alien shared a fleeting, unspoken connection. Despite the absurdity of the moment, their eyes met briefly as she chirped softly, translating to, "You trust me now." "It is customary." He could barely process the words over the pounding of his heart and the dampness of his soaked shirt. His body reacted instinctively, a mixture of embarrassment, attraction, and undeniable excitement. She wasn't just a cleaning machine. She was agile, confident, playful, and utterly captivating. And in that brief, flustered contact, he realized that she might be enjoying the chaos just as much as he was, though she would never admit it outright. The captain, muttering about disciplinary reports and station safety protocols, finally retreated, shaking his head, leaving them to untangle themselves from the pile of tools, crates, and spilled liquids. The human leaned back, gasping for air, while she straightened, bending slightly as if to dust off her shoulders and maintain perfect poise. Her luminescent eyes flicked toward him, and she gave the faintest, mischievous smile. The human couldn't help but notice how perfectly timed her gestures were, how every acrobatic twist drew his gaze, and how, even amidst disaster, she radiated charm and confidence. After the captain left, the human attempted to regain composure, picking up fallen tools and wiping the remaining cleaning fluid from the floor. The janitor glided toward him, bending gracefully as she handed him a sponge, her movements almost hypnotic. He took it with trembling hands, unable to suppress the flutter of nerves and excitement. Every brush of her fingers against his palms, every accidental press against his arm, sent shivers down his spine. For a moment, the chaos faded, replaced by a tension neither could deny, a shared, electric acknowledgement that what had begun as cultural confusion was evolving into something far more intimate. The day ended with them catching their breath, surrounded by scattered tools and puddles of cleaning fluid, both laughing softly at the ridiculousness of it all. The human realized that despite the embarrassment, the flustered reactions, and the near misses, he had enjoyed every chaotic second. The alien's bending was no longer just a customary display. It had become a language of flotation, a playful invitation to intimacy, and a challenge he was eager to meet. He glanced at her, catching her subtle smirk, and felt an undeniable thrill, knowing that tomorrow would bring even more absurd, flustered, and irresistibly intimate encounters. By the following day, the human had learned, at least partially, to anticipate the alien janitor's exaggerated movements, though he knew full well that anticipation didn't make him any less flustered. She entered the room with her usual energy, twisting and bending as she carried her supplies, and he could feel the familiar flutter in his stomach as he watched her maneuver across the floor. He ducked instinctively when she swept the mop in wide arcs and nearly stumbled over a low-lying cord, but this time, he managed to catch himself without toppling over. He was improving, though just barely, and that tiny victory filled him with equal measures of pride and embarrassment. She tilted her head at him, her eyes glimmering with amusement, and chirped softly, which the translator rendered as, "You are learning. Trust deepens through observation." He muttered an awkward reply, still blushing, while silently marveling at how a cleaning ritual could produce so many chaotic, intimate, and undeniably flustering moments. The day's chaos unfolded in a more controlled, yet still hilariously unpredictable way. Tools were still dropped, a stray bucket of cleaning fluid tipped over, and a maintenance drone zipped through the air in panic at one point, but now the human's reactions were tempered by a sense of playful participation rather than outright panic. He ducked, dodged, and even mimicked a few of her stretching motions to avoid collisions, though he did so with minimal grace. She noticed and chirped approvingly, her translator reporting, "Participation enhances trust. I am pleased." Every accidental brush of their arms, every narrowly avoided collision, and every shared glance added a subtle, teasing layer of intimacy between them, and both could feel the attraction simmering just beneath the surface of their ridiculous antics. Other staffers occasionally peered in from behind doors or around corners, their expressions a mix of shock and amusement. One whispered to another, pointing at the human, "Is he dating the janitor?" The second shook their head, laughing quietly, clearly entertained by the daily spectacle. For the human and the alien janitor, these observations mattered little. The room was theirs, a stage for a strange, chaotic dance that had evolved from accidental fluster into playful interaction. She bent low to polish a panel while he carefully passed her a tool, their hands brushing briefly. He froze, his pulse spiking, and she gave a small hum of satisfaction, translating to, "Your cooperation pleases me. You are learning quickly." His eyes widened, partly from the proximity and partly from the unmistakable undertone in her words that suggested mutual interest rather than mere courtesy. The romantic tension grew in subtle ways. Where previously every flustered glance or accidental touch had been interpreted as a misunderstanding, now there was intention woven into their interactions. She would perform a particularly elaborate bend or twist not strictly necessary for cleaning, and he found himself intentionally positioning himself to witness it, careful, of course, to maintain a facade of professional observation. When he accidentally brushed against her, he no longer recoiled in panic. Instead, a fleeting warmth spread across his chest, matched by her soft hum of acknowledgement. It was a language all their own, communicated through missteps, glances, and bending motions, and they were fluent in it now. The chaos remained, but it was tempered with laughter and playful anticipation. He tripped over a stray mop, only to have her catch him mid-fall with a twist of her limbs that would have defied human anatomy. He ended up pressed against her chest, both of them laughing and dripping with a mixture of cleaning fluid and perspiration. Instead of embarrassment, there was shared enjoyment, a sense of camaraderie forged in ridiculous circumstances. Even when a container tipped and splashed over the floor, he barely flinched. She simply swooped into an exaggerated bow, wiping it up with practiced grace, as if it were a choreographed performance meant to elicit laughter rather than panic. By the end of the day, the human leaned against a wall, exhausted but exhilarated. Tools were scattered, the floor was slick in places, and the faint smell of cleaning fluid lingered in the air, yet he felt a quiet satisfaction. She bent forward slightly, dusting a low console, and he couldn't resist moving closer, deliberately staying within reach of her next motion. Her translator rendered her soft chirp as, "You have adapted well. Our trust grows." He chuckled awkwardly, nodding, and she gave a small, knowing smile in response, bending just a fraction lower, teasing, playful, intentional. He realized then that the bending, twisting, and chaotic cleaning had become a private ritual, a dance that was part cultural, part flirtation, and wholly intoxicating. As they straightened and prepared to leave the room, a moment of quiet lingered between them. Neither spoke, but the air hummed with unspoken understanding. Their eyes met, and in that brief glance, both acknowledged what had been building over days of chaotic interaction, attraction, trust, and a playful romance that defied the ordinary. The human finally allowed himself a small, self-aware grin, realizing he no longer dreaded her presence. Instead, he anticipated the next tumble, the next brush, the next flustered exchange, because each moment brought them closer, not just physically, but emotionally. She bent slightly in farewell, her gesture customary and yet undeniably charged, and he found himself imagining the day tomorrow, when chaos, laughter, and intimacy would unfold again in their uniquely flustering, hilariously adult rhythm. By the time the door slid shut, he knew one thing clearly. The alien janitor's bending wasn't just a custom of her species. It had become the language of their connection, messy, chaotic, and irresistible. Amid the spills, slips, and comic disasters, they had found a rhythm that was theirs alone. An adult, flirtatious dance that blurred the lines between cultural misunderstanding, chaotic comedy, and something profoundly romantic. The chaos of the station, once a source of frustration, had become a stage for intimacy, laughter, and the slow, teasing development of a love that was as unconventional as it was undeniable.